Hi, Julie Jones from SSB Performance, Smarter, Stronger, Better Mindset Training, here with this week's Mindset Made Simple Tip of the Week, brought to you by Game Day Sportswear and On Point Pest Control. This week, we're talking about facing pressure. Are you up against pressure at the end of the season or at the end of the fiscal year? Well, we need a plan in order to manage that pressure. More than half of my teams, my spring teams, are in the fight for the championship, and that is so exciting. But oh, the pressure. And whether or not you're a coach who is fighting to get into the tournament or getting ready to play your first tournament game, or you're just trying to hold it together to the end of the season, or you're a business person coming up upon the end of your fiscal year on June 30, the end signals pressure. Well, everything we do, anything that we do that matters is going to apply or create some pressure. Really doesn't apply because the environment doesn't apply anything to us. We create the pressure inside of ourselves. How do we manage the pressure when we get to the end? Whether it's dealing with people going into the portal and the pressure of it closing for basketball here in a few days, or maybe you're an athlete trying to decide what to do. There's pressure all around our decisions and our being. One thing that I know is if we don't acknowledge that certain things are different, we will not perform at our best. It's like shooting foul shots at the beginning of the game when we've got 35 minutes left to play, or shooting foul shots at the end of the game with a few ticks left on the clock and the score being really close. Those are exactly the same act, but boy, do they feel different. And because they feel different, we act different. And if we don't acknowledge that those two things are different, then we're not going to make the best choices or get ourselves in the right state to be our best. I'm reading a book called Courage Over Confidence, Managing Mind Chatter and Winning the Mental Game by Dr. Mitchell Green. And he says that there is no way, and we know this whether we're a business person or a coach or an athlete, we know that there is no way to make pressure exactly the same as a game. They don't feel the same because they're not the same. Pressure in practice, even if there is some pressure, we know we get to do it again. In a game, that is not necessarily the case. So those two experiences feel very different to us, even though the bases are still the same distance, the field is still the same, we're using the same implements to do the game that where we're playing, or we're saying the same words in a presentation. It's different when we're in front of an audience or when there's a result. And if we don't acknowledge that, it's like trying to hold a beach ball down underneath the water. And while we're holding that beach ball down, we've got both hands on it. And if we let even one hand up just for a split second, you know what happens. The ball goes shh, and it flies up into the air. Well, everything that we do needs at least one hand to do. So if we're going to manage pressure, it's not by holding it down. But the problem is we are taught, whether we're a little boy or a little girl, we are taught to smother or hide our emotion. We need to toughen up. We need to step up to the plate. We've got to be mentally tough. And we think that that's what mental toughness is. But mental toughness is not pretending like, oh, this is just another game, or this is just another situation. And yes, we've got to be able to face them, and it is just another game, but it feels different, so we act different. Mental toughness is being able to figure out how we're going to manage what's right in front of us so that we can get to the next thing. That's toughness. But we're not taught that. And we're also not taught the fact that we have to acknowledge the way we feel so that we can move on and we can address it and we can look at it. In fact, we need to put a little light on the subject, as they say, and do a little interrogation on the bad guy. And maybe it's not a bad guy, because really when we feel pressure, we feel anxious, it's usually because it means something or our body's turning on so that we're ready to go. But we've got to put some light on the subject so we can investigate how it's changing our behaviors. Because if our behaviors are different than what's gotten us here, then we're not going to get the result that we want. So we've got to put a little light on the subject and say, yes, I feel a little tense. Some of us speed up when we're under pressure. That might be me. I remember we were at Michigan at the NCAA tournament, and I had just brought the team in, and we were getting ready. It was pregame, getting ready to head out to the field or go into the dugout and get ourselves set for the last few minutes of pregame. And one of my players looked at me and she said, "Coach, are you nervous?" And apparently I was talking 100 miles an hour, which is no surprise to me. And I was like, yes, this is exciting. And we went on to talk about how we felt, whether we felt like we were going to pee our pants or whether we felt like we were going to throw up. We can still work through this, but we had to acknowledge that fact and not pretend like, oh yeah, this is just another game. We're at Cleveland State playing. No, we're playing Michigan in front of the third biggest crowd ever at the time at the NCAA tournament. Our first time ever as a program. That's different. Some of us feel lethargic when we get under pressure. We feel like we need to take a nap. Maybe that's because of our disrupted sleep leading up to that, or maybe that's just our body's physiological fight or flight reaction. I've been there too. I remember feeling a little tired at a championship game because I was up at 3 a.m. thinking about what we were going to do the next day under pressure. How are we going to face it? Sitting in the hotel lobby certainly wasn't helpful. So what could I have done prior to that to help me prep for the pressure that was ahead? We knew it was coming. What are we going to do? We've got to make a plan. Dr. Mitchell Green, who wrote Courage Over Confidence, Managing Our Mind Chatter and Winning the Mental Game, says, there is no way, and we know this from our experience, that we can make practice feel like a game, let alone a championship game or a tournament game or the end of the season game. It's going to feel different. And it's ridiculous to think that we could make it so. He says it's unrealistic to think that we would feel the same in both instances. We're not going to. So what are we going to do? If we don't notice or acknowledge the way that we feel, we can't label it and then move on from it. Again, we can only hold it under the water for so long because we've got to get to work with these. And these are what's holding it down. And we know that if we let it up, now we're distracted by how high it goes. It is there. So let's do something about it. This doesn't mean that we allow our emotion to drive us. In fact, it means that we acknowledge our emotion. We label it as such. Hey, thanks, body, or thanks, mind, for alerting me to the fact that I need to be focused. My attention needs to come in. Thank you. It's not about allowing that to direct us. It's not even allowing us to sit and say, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. Are you nervous? Are you nervous? No. It's saying, okay, this is the way I feel. This is what's real, but this is my plan. This is what's in front of me. These are the facts of how I got here. This is what I can do and what I've done in the past. This is what I plan to do now. It's how Billie Jean King says that pressure is a privilege. We need to take her mindset. She also says it only comes to those who earn it. She goes on to say, it's how we look at something, whether we feel a lot of pressure or not. I like pressure. It helps me realize that there's an opportunity. We got here. Now what? We've got to put a little light on it. We've got to acknowledge it. And now we build our if, then, or when, then plans. We're back to our implementation intentions. We have a lot of questions we can ask. It's our contingency plan. When we get there, what will we do when we get pulled away from our optimal mental state or our optimal physical state? What are we going to do? How are we going to feel when we get put in that situation that we've been imagining? What situations might be more pressure-filled than others? We need to look for those and say, okay, that's something I know that has pulled me off my game before. I need to make sure I have a plan for that. What might our distractions include? What will we do when they present themselves? What are we making bigger than it really is? And where do we need to pull back and take a look at things a little bit more on the whole? Where are we so narrowed in pre-competition, or even when we get into the competition, that we're like, whoa, that seems so big, so hard. What am I worried about? We need to notice where we go in those situations so that we can adapt and adjust. What are we worried about? And where do we need to say, everything won't be perfect? We know that. It's not going to go exactly as planned. So we can be ready and we can adjust. It's the intentionally implementation intentions. When this happens, I'm going to do that. Or when that happens, I'm going to do this. Here's an example. If we get a bad official, I accept that both teams are dealing with the same thing and figure out ways to use that zone to my advantage. If he's calling pitches in the other batter box, then it's time for our pitchers to use that too. Instead of complaining about it, because that's where we normally go under pressure because we don't think is normally under pressure, we're going to have a plan. If we get a bad zone or if we have a bad referee, how are we going to use that to our advantage instead of allowing it to be a disadvantage in our own mind and making us change the way that we feel about things? Instead, let's find a way to change our behaviors so that we can use it to our advantage. Here's another one. If I hear my dad after I make a mistake, I will thank him for trying to help, even though he's probably not really helping, and use my refocus tool and tell myself what I plan to do out loud. I have tools. I'm going to implement them intentionally. If then. These situations could be endless. Think of all the things that we need to plan for. But maybe we just need to shrink it down to those things that really stand out, those things we know throw us off our game. What makes us feel the most pressure? Make a plan for those. It gives us a chance to have a mindset shift if we see that coming down the road. Because if we don't do that, we will get carried away by emotion. We will feel unnecessary pressure. Because when we feel stress, our mind rushes. And if we can stop and acknowledge and then implement, we've regained control of the situation. We feel better about what we're about to do because we know what we're about to do. If we don't face that the fact that we feel different, we give up an opportunity to figure out how we perform at our best and what keeps us from doing that. So these simple implementation intentions can really help us plan and prep for pressure. Whew, I feel a little tight today. Tight muscles aren't good. Tight mindsets aren't good. We need to be able to observe. We need to be able to be fluid. We need to be able to adjust. And if we have a plan, it allows us to open up and broaden our spectrum of what we see and notice how we feel so that we can take how we feel and turn it into how we need to feel or what we really need to do in this moment to be our best. Pressure's a privilege, as Billie Jean King said. You're here for a reason. So if you feel different, how are you going to use that to your advantage? It's okay to feel different. But if we don't realize how different makes us act different, then we're not helping ourselves. So manage the pressure by managing how you acknowledge your feelings, and that will help you manage the moments. Here's to a great end of the semester for all of those that are wrapping up this week or next. And until next week, when we talk about being a transformational coach in a transactional culture, have a great week.